Gang leader falls for innocent woman. Emotional age gap relationship love story. The night Dante Moretti first saw Elena Martinez, he was standing in the shadows of his club counting blood money, while she scrubbed tables with hands too delicate for such rough work. He was 42, years old with scars mapping, every betrayal across his chest and a reputation that made grown men weep. She was 23 with eyes like warm honey and a smile she gave to everyone, even when the world had given her nothing back. He told himself to look away, that a man with his darkness had no business noticing someone who still believed in goodness. But Dante had spent 2 decades ruling the South Boston underworld through fear and violence, and he had learned one undeniable truth. The things you try hardest to resist are the ones that will destroy you most beautifully. She looked up from her work that first night, caught him staring from across the room, and instead of fear flickering across her face, she smiled at him like he was just another person deserving of warmth. In that single moment, something cracked open inside his chest that he thought had calcified into stone years ago. He knew right then that Elena Martinez would either save him or ruin him. And for the first time in his violent life, Dante found himself hoping desperately for either outcome as long as it meant being close to her light. If you believe in second chances, in the possibility that even the darkest souls can find redemption through love, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to channel name, because every story we tell here is about the power of the human heart to transform even the most broken among us. Dante had built his empire on fear and ruthless efficiency. He had taken over his first territory at 19 after his father was gunned down in a restaurant, and by 25 he controlled every illegal operation from the waterfront to Dorchester. He had killed men with his bare hands, ordered executions without blinking, and slept soundly afterward because that was the world he inhabited. A world where mercy was weakness and love was a liability that got you buried. His crew respected him absolutely. His enemies feared him religiously, and the women who warmed his bed knew better than to expect anything beyond a few hours of distraction. Dante had convinced himself that this was enough, that power and respect were suitable replacements for the softer things other men seemed to need. Then Elena walked into his club looking for work, and suddenly everything he had told himself about being content with his cold existence revealed itself as the elaborate lie it had always been. She had come to Boston from a small town in New Mexico after her mother died, leaving her with nothing but debt and a battered suitcase full of dreams that seemed increasingly foolish in the harsh reality of the city. Elena was studying nursing at community college during the day while working 3 jobs to survive, and the cleaning position at Dante's club was supposed to be temporary, just until she could save enough to catch up on rent. She had no idea who owned the place, no understanding of the kind of business conducted in the private rooms upstairs, no concept that the handsome older man who watched her with such intensity was responsible for half the crime in the city. She only knew that he always left extraordinarily generous tips, that his eyes followed her with something that looked like longing mixed with regret, and that despite his severe expression and the dangerous edge that seemed to emanate from him, she felt inexplicably safe in his presence. Dante tried to maintain distance. He told himself that watching over her from afar was enough, that ensuring none of his men spoke to her disrespectfully or that the manager paid her fairly and on time was the extent of his involvement. But Elena had a way of dismantling his carefully constructed walls without even trying. She would hum while she worked, old Spanish songs her mother had taught her, and the sound would drift through his office like a prayer in a place that had forgotten how to be sacred. She brought homemade food to share with the other staff, even though she barely had enough for herself. And she talked to everyone with genuine interest, asking about their families and remembering details that made hardened criminals soften in her presence. She was goodness personified in a place built on corruption, and Dante found himself restructuring his entire schedule just to be in the same room with her, breathing the same air, existing in the orbit of her light. The first time they spoke beyond pleasantries was on a cold November night when Elena stayed late to finish cleaning after a private party. Dante had sent everyone else home but remained in his office, unable to leave while she was still in the building, some protective instinct demanding he ensure she got to her car safely. When he finally went downstairs, he found her crying quietly in the corner, her phone clutched in her hand, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and despair. Later he would learn that her landlord had just called to say he was evicting her, that the hospital where her mother had died was threatening, legal action over unpaid bills, that the weight of trying to survive while staying good in a world designed to harden you had finally become too much. In that moment, though, all Dante knew was that watching her cry felt like someone was driving knives into his chest, and before he could talk himself out of it, he was crossing the room and asking in his rough voice if she was all right. Elena looked up at him with tears streaming down her face and did something that no one had done to Dante in 20 years. She told him the truth. Not a cleaned-up version or a face-saving lie, but the raw, vulnerable reality of her situation. She explained that she was failing because the world was too hard and she was too soft, that she was terrified she would have to give up on her dreams and go back home defeated, that she felt guilty for being unable to pay her mother's final debts and honor her memory properly. She apologized for breaking down at work, promised it wouldn't happen again, and tried to pull herself together with a dignity that broke Dante's heart into pieces. He stood there listening to this young woman pour out her struggles, and something fundamental shifted inside him. Without thinking about consequences, or propriety or the 2-decade age gap that made this impossible, Dante made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He told her he would help, that she could stay in one of his properties rent-free until she got on her feet, that he would take care of the hospital debt. Elena refused immediately, pride flashing in her eyes, insisting she wasn't a charity case. So Dante offered her a different job instead, one that paid 3 times what she made cleaning, managing the administrative side of his legitimate businesses. It was work she could actually do, and it gave her a reason to accept his help without feeling like she owed him anything beyond professional competence. What started as a business arrangement transformed into something neither of them could name but both felt with devastating intensity. Elena began working in the office adjacent to Dante's, and suddenly his days had color and warmth they had never contained before. She would bring him coffee in the morning exactly how he liked it, even though he had never told her his preferences, somehow intuiting what he needed. She asked him about his day with genuine interest, and Dante found himself talking to her about things he had never discussed with anyone, carefully edited versions of his life that left out the violence but included the loneliness, the weight of responsibility, the strange isolation of being feared by everyone you encounter. Elena listened without judgment, and she had a way of seeing past his harsh exterior to the man he might have been if life had dealt him different cards. She told him stories about her mother, about growing up poor but loved, about her dream of becoming a nurse so she could help people, the way the hospital staff had tried to help her mother in those final days. She talked about believing that people were fundamentally good even when they made bad choices, that everyone deserved compassion and second chances. When she said these things while looking at him with those warm honey eyes, Dante wanted desperately to believe he could be one of those people worthy of redemption. The crew noticed the change in their boss and didn't know what to make of it. Dante was less volatile, more thoughtful, occasionally even merciful when mercy served no strategic purpose. His second-in-command, Marco, pulled him aside one night and warned him that caring about someone was dangerous in their line of work, that enemies would use Elena against him if they discovered she mattered. Dante knew Marco was right, but he was already too far gone to protect himself. He had fallen for Elena with the totality of a man who had never allowed himself to feel anything real, and now that he had tasted what it meant to care about someone more than himself, he couldn't go back to the hollow existence he had endured before. So instead of distancing himself, Dante did something that terrified him more than any rival gang or federal investigation ever had. He let himself hope that maybe, impossibly, Elena could come to care for him too, despite everything he was and everything he had done. Elena was not naive about who Dante was. She had heard the whispers, seen the deference people showed him that went beyond normal respect, noticed the way conversations stopped when she entered rooms where business was being discussed. She knew his wealth came from sources that existed in moral gray areas, at best in criminal enterprises at worst. What she didn't know was the extent of the violence, the bodies buried on his orders, the full darkness of the empire he had built. But Elena saw something in Dante that perhaps no one else could see because they were too afraid to look closely. She saw the loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the way he was unfailingly gentle with her despite his fearsome reputation, how he went out of his way to help people who worked for him when they faced troubles of their own. She noticed that he never raised his voice to her, that he listened when she talked about her values and dreams without mocking her idealism, that he looked at her sometimes with an expression of such raw longing and hope that it made her heart ache. Elena had been warned by well-meaning friends to stay away from men like Dante, but her heart had already made a choice her mind was still trying to rationalize. The night everything changed began like so many others, with Elena working late and Dante finding excuses to stay at the office until she was ready to leave so he could ensure she got home safely. They had fallen into a comfortable routine of having dinner together in his office, takeout from local restaurants that Elena would order because Dante ate like someone who had forgotten food could be enjoyable. On this particular night, she had asked him about the scars on his hands, the ones that looked like knife wounds, and instead of deflecting as he usually did, Dante found himself telling her the truth. He explained about his father's murder, about being thrust into a world of violence as a teenager, about the choices he had made to survive and then to dominate so thoroughly that survival was never in question again. He told her things he had never spoken aloud, about the emptiness of his existence, about becoming the kind of man who inspired fear instead of love because fear seemed more reliable. He confessed that meeting her had made him question everything, that she made him want to be someone different, someone worthy of her goodness. When he finished speaking, Dante waited for Elena to recoil, to finally see him clearly, and run from the monster he knew himself to be. Instead, Elena reached across the desk and took his scarred hands in her smooth ones. She told him that she had learned from her mother that people were not defined by their worst moments but by their capacity for change and growth. She said that everyone carries darkness inside them, that trauma and circumstances shape people in ways that aren't always fair, and that she believed Dante was more than the sum of his choices. Then Elena did something that shattered every defense. Dante had spent decades constructing. She told him that she had feelings for him too, that she knew their age difference and different worlds should make this impossible, but her heart didn't care about logic or propriety. She said that being with him felt right in a way nothing else in her chaotic life did, that she felt safe and seen and valued in his presence. She admitted she was probably foolish to love a man like him, but she had always been too emotional and too willing to believe in the possibility of redemption. The word love hung in the air between them like something fragile and precious, and Dante felt tears burn behind his eyes for the first time since he was a boy watching his father bleed out on a restaurant floor. Dante pulled Elena into his arms then, holding her with a desperation that spoke of years of loneliness finally breaking open. He kissed her with reverence and hunger intertwined, tasting hope and possibility on her lips, feeling her soft body against his scarred one like proof that opposite forces could somehow coexist. In that moment, wrapped in Elena's acceptance and unconditional care, Dante made a promise to himself that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of this gift she was offering him. He knew he couldn't erase his past or suddenly become innocent of the blood on his hands, but he could start making different choices. He could begin the slow work of building something legitimate and clean that Elena could be proud of, that would give meaning to his remaining years beyond just accumulating power and wealth. He could protect her goodness instead of corrupting it, could let her light guide him toward becoming someone better than he had ever imagined possible. The road ahead would not be easy. Dante's world was complicated and dangerous, and extracting himself from certain obligations while maintaining enough strength to keep Elena safe required careful navigation and strategic planning. There were threats from rivals who would see his softening as weakness, investigations from authorities who had been building cases against him for years, and the constant fear that someone would discover how much Elena meant to him and use her as leverage. But for the first time in his adult life, Dante had something worth the risk and the struggle. He had someone who believed in him not despite his darkness, but with full knowledge of it. Someone who thought his capacity for change and growth was more important than his history of violence and crime. Elena became his reason for wanting to be better, and slowly, painfully, he began the process of transformation that seemed impossible before he met her. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in the power of love to transform even the most broken among us, then please like this video, comment below telling us what you felt, and share it with someone who needs to hear that redemption is always possible. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these emotional stories to you every week on channel name. Years later, when people would ask how a gang leader and an innocent young woman from completely different worlds managed to build a life together, Dante would always say the same thing. He would explain that Elena didn't fix him or save him in some magical way that erased decades of choices and consequences. Instead, she loved him enough to make him want to save himself, and she stayed beside him during the difficult work of becoming someone who could accept that love without feeling unworthy of it. She challenged him to be better while accepting where he was, and that combination of high expectations and unconditional support gave Dante the strength to do the terrifying work of changing from the inside out. He left the criminal world gradually, reinvesting his wealth into legitimate businesses and creating opportunities for others who wanted to escape that life. He used his strategic mind and his understanding of the streets to become an advocate for young people caught in the same cycles of violence and poverty that had shaped his youth. The transition was painful and complicated, but with Elena beside him, Dante discovered that it was possible to honor your past while still choosing a different future. Comment below and tell us, do you believe that love can truly change a person, or do people have to choose to change themselves? We want to hear your thoughts. Elena continued her nursing studies and eventually fulfilled her dream of working at the hospital where her mother had died, bringing compassion and excellent care to patients who reminded her why she had chosen this difficult path. She never tried to change Dante into someone he wasn't, but she also never compromised on her values or accepted behavior that violated her principles. Their relationship taught both of them that love at its best makes you want to grow toward your highest self while accepting you exactly as you are in the present moment. The age gap that seemed so significant at first became irrelevant in the face of mutual respect, shared values, and the deep understanding they developed of each other's hearts. They built a life that honored both their histories while creating something entirely new, proving that the most powerful love stories are not about perfect people finding each other, but about flawed humans choosing each other and then doing the hard work of growing together. Dante Moretti, once the most feared man in South Boston, became known instead as someone who proved that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to pursue it, and that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in dominating others, but in surrendering to love and allowing it to transform you into someone worthy of the grace you've been given.